Today on the Videomaker Podcast, Chris and I talk with Jim Lebrecht and Nicole Newnham, co-directors of Crip Camp. Crip Camp tells the story of a group of people at Camp Lened in Northern California who became activists fighting for accessibility legislation. It's really an incredible documentary, which you can watch now on Netflix, and we highly encourage you to do so. Again, if you've been listening to the podcast, as always, we would love it if you went over to iTunes and gave us a 5-star review if you like what you hear. It's really, really helpful for podcasts like ours to get some visibility. So with that, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Videomaker Podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, across town is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
And today, special guests Nicole Newnham and Jim Lebrecht from Crip Camp. How's it going, guys?
Good to be here.
Pretty good. Thanks for having us.
All right. So you guys just directed and released Crip Camp, which is on Netflix, and I want to talk all about it. But actually, before we dive into that, just because I think our audience would be into it, maybe you guys can start by just telling us, how did you get started with filmmaking, just generally? Either one of you who wants to take it from the top.
I kind of came to filmmaking via theater, actually. And I studied theater at UC San Diego, and when I moved to Berkeley, I got a job at Berkeley Rep. But while I was working at the Rep, I heard about the Saul Zaentz Film Center, Saul being the producer of The English Patient and Amadeus and all these great films, not realizing that they were right there in Berkeley. And over the course of time, I wound up getting introductions to some of the supervisors. I would get them comp tickets to shows at the Berkeley Rep and take them out for a beer afterwards, and eventually got my way onto some crews there, and kind of worked my way up from apprentice at the age of like 33 up to being a sound designer and mixer, and then started my own company, Berkeley Sound Artists, about 25 years ago. And we really focused on documentary filmmaking. And that is where I met Nicole.
I took a more conventional route into filmmaking. I think I saw The Times of Harvey Milk, the documentary, when I was at undergraduate in college, and it made a huge impression on me, both in that I couldn't believe how one documentary could completely change the way I saw the world, and also in that it made me really want to move to San Francisco and become a part of the community in San Francisco. And so I decided to enroll in a broadcast communication arts program, master's program, when I graduated at San Francisco State University. But when I got into it, it was mostly men, and all the women ended up being actors in the men's films. And so I remember standing there wrapped up in a towel in some guy's, fake advertisement and in a locker room somewhere, and thinking like, this is not for me. And somebody told me, I volunteered at a film festival, actually at the Telluride Film Festival. And a person I met there said, well, you should really consider this documentary film program at Stanford, which I had never heard of. And they said it's run by 2 women. And everybody gets tons of hands-on experience, because I really wanted to know how to hold a camera and how to do sound recording and to have that kind of technical mastery before I would go into directing. And so I did transfer into that program, luckily, and my student film was selected for Sundance, and that helped me get jobs. And I just did a Discovery Channel. I'm old, and the Discovery Channel was just kind of getting going in those days. So I worked on a ton of Animal Trainers of Hollywood for Animal Planet, and a big show called The Human Sexes about human sexuality from kind of like a zoological perspective that was all over the world. And I kind of have always done independent documentary film development, kind of my own projects, like Crip Camp was, alongside work in television, and it was in the making of my 3 previous independent feature documentaries that I started working with Jim as a sound mixer and sound designer, which was a fabulous collaboration, and eventually we started talking about projects we could do together.
So it's interesting. You're both in the Bay Area, and everyone always thinks about, getting into filmmaking in the sense that you got to like move to Los Angeles or move to New York to really do anything. But you guys have managed to build careers out of San Francisco. So what was the trick there? Like, how did you manage to pull that off?
I think there's a wonderful community up here. And I think that you find that some of us are up here because we don't want to live in New York City or Los Angeles. But I also, the hub of the Saul Zaentz Film Center, which Saul had opened up a number of floors to just independent filmmakers to rent rooms cheaply. Skywalker Sound, just the whole place. And Francis Coppola's Zoetrope Films was hiring a lot of people. And San Francisco's, has been a wonderful destination for locations for film. So it's rather vibrant here.
Yeah, and particularly for the kind of like social justice, documentary filmmaking that Jim and I have worked in a lot. It's a really incredible community of people who really have each other's backs and support each other, and we all work together. And it feels like kind of a whole world unto itself. So when you're a part of it, you're not constantly thinking like, God, I'm not in LA. I'm like this rogue independent person. You feel very buoyed by the community that's in the Bay Area.
It's definitely where you're finding the passion for the social justice cases and all the rest. It's definitely I would love to live in the Bay Area. We don't live too far away in Chico, but it's definitely a great place for impassioned people to come together for sure.
So for those people who have not heard of Crip Camp, which is on Netflix and getting lots of attention right now, maybe you can give us just a quick synopsis of what is the film encompass? What's the story that's being told here?
Jim, you want me to give that a try, or do you want to?
Yeah, I had that lovely task the other day. We just trade off on this.
Okay, so I mean, basically, when I'm going to give you kind of the pitch that Jim gave me when he proposed this project to me, and said, that he went to this summer camp for the handicapped. In the Catskills when he was a teenager, and that he heard about it because somebody came to visit the kind of straight summer camp that he was going to at the time and said, oh man, you got to try this other camp because you can smoke dope with the counselors there. And Jim was like, Dad, I'd really like to try this summer camp down the road. And Camp Lened was a profoundly freeing place for the people that attended it, and actually for the people that worked there too. It was kind of a hippie utopian community unto itself, where kids were just treated like kids, and they were given tons of freedom to fall in love and have fun and discover themselves. And in the course of that, they discover that the problems that they're having in their life back home are not because of who they are, but because of the structural oppression in society. And they start to become political. And that what Jim and I wanted to explore was, how did that profound experience of freedom ignite a movement that ended up literally changing the entire world, and that it pushed forward the first civil rights legislation for people with disabilities, but it also was responsible for pretty much every curb cut that you see on a street in this country, and actually in some ways around the world, and really profoundly altered the world for everybody and made the world a better place for everybody.
It's a absolutely wonderful story. I hadn't watched it, so I had to make sure to watch it to make sure I knew what we were all talking about today. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad to get to talk to you guys. I feel very privileged to get to do that. Being a child of the 80s, I guess, I didn't really understand or see the history of what it took to have integration with people with disabilities. And it's enlightening to get to know that story and to hear the fight, because I think that's only in America could we fight and be heard and actually get somewhere and make that happen. And I'm talking to our audience now. If you haven't watched it, you really should. It's just a fantastic story. And for Jim, I think it's got to be a little strange to make a film where like your whole life is the story, but it's not a story about you, right? I know for myself, I don't like looking at footage of myself last week, let alone if I had footage of myself when I was 15. It must have been a real interesting path to get to go through all of that and make a story of it. Was that an odd experience for you?
Oh, rather surreal, to say the least. I took a photograph in the mix room because I also mixed the film one day, and just with my console in front of me, and there's a photograph on the screen of me in front of the console we had at the Berkeley Rep, and from like 1980, and it was just rather surreal. I will say I didn't mind looking. I mean, it was a lot better looking then than I am now, so I didn't mind looking at the footage too much for that. But on the other hand, it was very bittersweet to see all of this footage. There were people who first off, my time at camp was remarkable, and to be able to relive that felt like I was given a really incredible gift. And I missed a lot of the people I saw in the video.
Yeah, the access that the film crew that when you were 15, I would love to have footage of myself being interviewed when I was 15 about the thoughts in my head. And I couldn't even, I couldn't tell you how I felt then, but to watch that now would be enlightening to see your path of where you've gone, but to see that throughout your life and see the growth in awareness and is like you said, it's quite a gift to be able to see those things, and it's amazing that stuff even exists. What was it like to get that footage? Like, did the team that was shooting back at camp, it's Lened, right? Mm-hmm. Have you stayed in touch with them? How was it finding that footage? Because that can't be easy, I imagine. It's not easily sourced footage.
Well, the People's Video Theater is the group that shot the footage, and they were a radical video coalition in the very, very early days of portable video, literally like the first year of it. And what they would do is these pop-up video theaters. So they would go to a community in New York and they would film people, and then they would play the footage of them back to themselves immediately. So people were seeing themselves on TV for the first time, which was really transformational for people and really exciting. And they felt like that was a community empowerment, like a political community empowerment tool. And they literally stumbled with their equipment into a gas station in the Catskills and ran into a van full of campers and counselors who said, "Hey, you guys should come and shoot the Camp Olympics." And then when they got there, the gate was shut, and they were like, somebody said, "Oh, the camp's closed down for a bit, but it'll be reopened later." So they just sat down in the grass and dropped some acid and were hanging out. And a few hours later, this was 1971, a few hours later, somebody came back out and said, "Okay, you can come in now." When they came in, instead of the Olympics, the camp was in the middle of the crabs outbreak that was started by a couple of amorous counselors. And sheets were all over on the lawn, and the swimming pool was full of sheets. And these guys just turned their cameras on and started filming, and they stayed for days, and they recorded all this material. And Jim had a memory that the crew had been there, and there had been a short crabs tape that had floated around on Manhattan cable television. But we couldn't remember the name. We didn't know the full name of the group or who was in it or how to track them down. And we just did a ton of internet sleuthing because, the idea, given that we wanted to make a film about this story, that Jim had a memory that they had handed him the camera and strapped the old Porta-Pack on the back of his chair, and he had filmed this camp tour, was just like, "Oh, we have to find this," And luckily, when we finally tracked down Howard Gutstadt, who was part of the People's Video Theater, we're in the East Bay, as we were discussing, and Howard was in San Francisco. and he had all the footage. It had survived like 17 basements that it had been put in over time.
Wow.
And not only that, but he had just gotten a grant, and he and his colleague, Ben Levine, were halfway through digitizing the footage at the Bay Area Video Coalition.
Wow.
And so it was all intact and all beautiful. And we helped them, get the money together to finish the digitizing. And then they just delivered us this hard drive, and nobody knew what was on it. Nobody could remember what had been shot. So all of those scenes that you see in the film, the round table where Jim's leading the round table, and, everybody's talking and interacting, like, Jim, you didn't even remember that had happened, right? So it was just like an awe-inspiring, magical, like this is meant to be kind of thing, to discover that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was such a good basis for all the story. People seeing this when they showed the shot of when you guys showed the shot of the the TV there, and that you could see your hand moving on the screen. I'm like, I remember having that experience, and that's such it's such a neat story. I mean, that they were so. First year of using portable video. I mean, just what amazing. I would say luck, but it sounds like it's deeper than that. Pretty amazing. And then all the rest of the stuff was mostly from newscasts. And I mean, as it starts getting more political in the stories, is that mostly true? Because it seems like it goes between some black and white, some color, and then some like amazing film at times. So that you guys had to hunt all that down as well, I imagine.
Yeah, we did. And that was really hard to hunt down. It took years, actually, and it took real diligence. We had some brilliant archival researchers working on it. We had an incredible associate producer, Lauren Schwartzman, who just like completely dedicated herself. And, none of that was in like, it wasn't like, oh, here's the 16 rolls of footage of the, takeover of the federal building, which lasted 26 days, which is kind of a centerpiece of the film. It was like, okay, here's a tape that's unlabeled in a cardboard box in the basement of an archive that happens to have about 6 shots on it because some guy was maybe going to make a film one day. And 2 of those shots we can piece together with these other 2 shots, which we found in an old documentary somebody made in the 70s. I mean, it was very not well archived, not well taken care of history. I think it was history that had kind of been like swept away and forgotten about, which is pretty shocking when you see the film and when you come to know the story. It's like, this should be one of the great stories of American history that we're all really proud as part of our heritage. And instead, it was very, very hard to scrap those things together. And our editors just did an incredible job, piecing things together so that they felt fluid and so that it felt like there was a little bit of continuity from that really immersive video at the camp. We had to kind of shift the perspective so that instead of it feeling like our people were part of the video making process and it was very intimate, it kind of becomes in the second part of the film more like, oh, we're finding our people now in footage that other people shot, which I think I think that's compelling too, right? Because like all of a sudden you realize these people you came to know as scrappy teenagers are becoming, historical figures doing something of real consequence that's being seen by news cameras. But that was filmically, that was a kind of a hard transition to make.
Yeah, you guys did a great job, because that was the thing that really stood out to me. There was a pan of I think it was this sit-in or what have you that lasted. That was like, oh, you already talked to that guy. They look familiar too, and that's it. Like just how amazing the fire is that was built at Camp Lened to inspire, to empower all those involved. It was pretty amazing. I worked at a TV station, and we went through a transition from standard definition to HD, and it was amazing how the owners of the company just were like, all right, all those bold beta tapes, there's a trash can outside, and we don't have space for it, so just tens of thousands of beta tapes that are all source material, but had not been at all organized. You would never know what's on them. There's not enough time in the day for anyone to ever go through them again. Unfortunately, and of course it's all gone now, and it's like the history of no one was screaming, "Hey, this is historical and should be valued by someone." But to think that footage that was shot at Hawk randomly on a day would make it through all those times, and that it's so much gold. I mean, the crew's ability to just show up at this place where everybody's just allowed to be who they are, and it seems like the crew is doing that as well. Just amazing. The richness that you guys were able to uncover. I really appreciate it. It's just amazing that those things could continue and be found. I mean, you guys were pretty hard to do that. Now I've derailed our conversation, Mike, that I've been gushing over your guys' ability to find this stuff, but I really do appreciate it. It's, I think, historically important. Well, I know it is, that people know this, because I went to a junior high that had a very large group of deaf kids, and it was amazing how not only were they click on their own, but how they interact with the rest of the school. And although their learning was a different experience, to know that where they were at there was on the backs of so much passion to get just that normality for them. And so I remember I worked at the same school that you didn't know when the deaf kids were in a fight, except for their hands were all flailing because they were all yelling at each other, doing sign language. And so it was, if there was a fight going on, it wasn't like the other kids that, kids would be yelling fight out loud, as you had to be paying attention to their gestures, and just that they could have that experience is, I think, remarkable, and very, I'm really appreciative that you guys' experience happened. But Mike,
one of the important things I think that the footage revealed and the whole film reveals is, just because you have a disability doesn't mean that, you don't have fight, or that you're not a jerk sometimes.
Totally.
Or that you aren't, you're interested in sex, especially when you're, 15 or years old. And that so often what what people understand about folks with disabilities is 99% of it is filtered through a non-disabled lens. And I think that's the power of Crip Camp, is that we take a very inside look of really what this experience is.
So, in the process of making a documentary, you hear a lot about, finding the story. And as you sort of peel back an onion, you're discovering layers to a story that you didn't expect to encounter. In this case, Jim, you lived it. So I would imagine, had a pretty good idea of what the story was going to be before you started. But as you were making this thing, how did it turn out? And how did your expectations of the story compare to the story as it ended up? Were you surprised at all as you went and started to uncover some footage at some of the events that you had forgotten about or didn't know about?
There's a lot of ways to answer that question. I had an initial idea that I pitched to Nicole, that I thought there was some history here that shouldn't be lost, of these people basically migrating from New York out to the Bay Area, and how the camp might have affected that and such. But it was really Nicole who really could see beyond my headlights about what this film could be. And we worked it was the best collaboration I'll ever have in my life. And it was, but this is my first time directing a film. Nicole's got 25 years of experience. I think that she's a great filmmaker, and I wanted her to direct this thing, and maybe I would produce or just be an advisor on it. And very early on, she said, well, I think we should direct this together, which I was game for, but also didn't take, lightly. It was a really wonderful offer, and it was like the first of many, many really great decisions.
Well, and your access to all the characters in the film, though, that's super valuable, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the story definitely did. When I started looking at it and reading about it, we started writing treatments that had the same general shape that the film has now, but we thought there was going to be a lot more current day exploration of people's lives today. And what I think one of the things that we discovered was that the footage at camp was so powerful, and the footage we were eventually able to find, which we didn't know until years went by and literally like a year of editing happened, that the history was going to be able to become kind of the present tense of the film instead of being the flashback. That wasn't clear to us at the beginning. And what kept happening is that we would have test screenings and people would just be like, don't take me off that, roller coaster ride of history. Like when I'm cutting back to people's, like they loved the characters and they were interested to know what had happened to them, but they didn't want to land in a scene today, because it was almost painful because the history was so exciting. And I don't think that we quite realized exactly how kind of seminal a history film we were making. I think we thought, because there'd been a previous documentary about, the 504 sit-in and the disability rights movement. There'd been kind of like historical documentaries about it. But I think that what we were able to eventually do, all of us working together, is make something really drops you in the middle of it from the perspective of characters you love and takes you through in a really exciting way. And that that was something that became clear to us as we went along. The thing that was really challenging was that what we had initially wanted to do, and we ended up doing, was land you in the camp, but not give away the movement piece of it. Let you just completely immerse yourself in the camp and get to know people and follow them around and get to feel like, without it being really explicit, but, kind of taking the verite footage and sort of architecting an emotional journey for all the characters, where you kind of feel that sense of them becoming a community and bonding and trusting each other and all of that. And then you get to see that play out later in the movement piece. But we started to get a lot of pressure from people who weren't sure that we were going to be able to make it work, that we should actually, say, start with the ADA signing and the end of the victory of the movement and then flash back. So everybody kind of knew where we were going and why they would want to spend so much time in the camp. And we really felt strongly that the power of the film was kind of in discovering that as you went forward. Like, oh my gosh, my buddies that I met at Camp Lened are now changing the world. And it was hard to get that right. But luckily we had our team of editors who were brilliant. And we all just dedicated ourselves to kind of like figuring out how to make that work. And I feel really grateful for that, that we all felt so passionately about that being the right way to move forward, and that we eventually achieved it. It was hard.
Yeah, I did really love, though, the following of self-discovery. I think it helps people identify, the story of wanting, being interested in sex and the opposite sex when you were 15, and the story going through there to parenthood, that I thought was that was the thing that got me when he was talking about not being judged by his kid, but. Just an amazing story. You guys did a good job.
Okay, let's just pause real quick and take a break, and we'll be right back. For years, Videomaker has been producing quality video training to help you take your video skills to the next level. Now you can access it all from a Videomaker Plus account. We've got courses covering everything from learning how to navigate your camera with our course on camera controls and settings, to learning about color grading, or even how to start a video business. Videomaker Plus has something for you. The Videomaker library is split into 4 levels. If you're just starting, try our inexpensive starter level membership, which gets you access to essential video training and a digital subscription to Videomaker magazine. For their most professional training, go all the way up to our professional tier membership, which gives you access to our entire library of training, which covers advanced concepts like running a video business or becoming a documentary filmmaker. Plus, the professional tier is the only membership with access to our popular webinar recordings. Plus, right now, for a limited time, you can get the professional tier of Videomaker Plus for the price of the creative tier. That's $100 savings. Sign up at videomaker.com/spring deal. That's videomaker.com/spring deal. All right, we're back. So, some people might watch the trailer or start watching this movie and be surprised to see that that the Obamas were involved in this. So, could you guys give us some background about how did they get involved with this story, and what was their involvement exactly?
So, the Obamas came onto the radar of our amazing executive producer, Howard Gertler. And he read in the trades about Higher Ground, the Obama's production company being founded. And he had this thought that maybe they would be interested in this story because Judy Heumann, this, amazing activist sort of star of our film, had worked in Obama's State Department. And Obama knew her. And then that kind of, as we talked about it, we realized that there was more than that they might be interested in. This sort of story is one of young people changing the world and grassroots organizing and other things that are really core values for the Obamas. And so through our sales agent, we were able to get a short sizzle reel that we put together to Priya Swaminathan, who had been just hired to run the company. And she said, well, we're not really looking at things yet. We're still trying to figure out the kind of mission statement of our company and what we're doing. But then she called us back and said, I don't know, you guys have done something here. I just can't stop thinking about this. And came up to Berkeley, spent a bunch of time with us. And at the end of that visit, we looked at footage and we talked about what the film could be. And we felt like we really had a shared vision with her about what the film would be. And she called us from the parking lot of our building and said, well, we want to make this film with you, and the president and Mrs. Obama feel the same way.
Wow. That must have been quite a moment to get that news.
Yeah. That doesn't happen every day.
No, it doesn't. And of course, at least for my first thing, I read the kind of synopsis and it's involved in there. When are we going to hear from Barack and Michelle? And I'm glad that they weren't in there. They didn't belong in the story. But it's great for you guys to be able to get the notoriety that, of course, anything associated with them does. But I do think it aligns very well with their mission statement now, and maybe you guys help shape that then.
We fit in very well, fortunately, for sure. But it's actually just an incredible experience. But also, you feel like you're really want to honor them and their work, and that's so it's a real absolute pleasure and incredible gift that we can do that.
So as you were wrapping up this film, I guess there was a plan for a theatrical release, right, which was ultimately canceled due to the virus. How much of the film's success do you think was impacted by that? Do you think there's a chance that it will get more attention and more visibility as a result, or no change at all?
I think that I think that what we found it's not the worst thing that could have happened, and that perhaps we landed at the perfect time. We had this extraordinary launch at Sundance where we won the Audience Award for Documentary. One of our funders helped get a number of the people in the film out to Park City, and we had this amazing standing ovation when the film came up with all these people with disabilities. I don't think there was that many people with disabilities on one stage at Sundance or just about any, at any festival before, and it was an incredible image. But the fact of the matter is that if people were staying at home, they were looking for things to watch. And once they got through the Tiger King, there we were. But also, yeah, and it's really made, the other great thing here is that when you're doing Q&As in a festival, you're on the stage and you're kind of trying to, who's talking? And here we are in some of the Q&As that Nicole and I are doing. We're seeing the people on their laptops and with their cameras on Zoom talking directly at us. And they can see us much closer. And I think that it allows for a bit more intimacy and openness. And certainly we had an extraordinary Q&A with a small group of disabled students at the University of Western Kentucky, or Western Kentucky University. And the sharing that just kind of went on there, and what the conversation that was provoked was really amazing. People really kind of opening up about their experiences. So I think in a lot of respects, it's been this kind of gift.
I agree. However, the film also plays incredibly well in a theater. And we had the good fortune of getting to not only go to Sundance, but also the True False Film Festival before everything shut down. And literally the week before everything shut down and our theatrical got canceled, we had a 1,700 person screening in the Missouri theater at True False. And wow. It was just spectacular. And the audience was responding as a community to everything. When the Black Panthers come in and give food for the sit-in, people were cheering Spider-Man had just showed up in the middle of a battle in a superhero movie. And afterwards, there was all this just rebel rousing in the Q&A. I feel like the film is very politically activating for people. It makes them want to, take things on and fight for justice. And you could hear people were shouting out things about how they wanted better access at the University of Missouri. And so, I'm sorry that we didn't get to carry that forward. And it just makes me think about how it's important. I think that, both things are really important, right? The sort of amazing accessibility of Zoom Q&As and the people that get to participate in them who otherwise might not go to a film festival or a theater has been really wonderful. And at the same time, I know that this experience has made me really long for and hope for the return of theaters and the movie going experience.
It's a different kind of captive audience, right? It's well, we got you. You're stuck at home, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get up and go to your fridge or let your dog out or, look at your phone or whatever. Whereas, in a cinema, it's so nice. It's lights are off. You pull out your phone, someone might slap you on the back of the head. And, it's definitely nice to have that. I was drawn to the idea of why the Tiger King was at all people even watched it, and it's one of those things where I don't think people would have if it wasn't for you're stuck here and you want to watch it. It's a totally different kind of documentary, and so I'm glad that although that's very pop culture and people like to be involved in it, that true stories get to be heard that are changing. My first thought when the film was over was, how do we organize to have those that need to know our views know them? How protests aren't going to look the same in the interim. How do we get people to know the point, and how do you access that? How do we show the power of the people when we're all individuals at home? And those kinds of things. And I think that there is a path there, but it just like you said, it's totally one of those. There's still lots of other things to be done. How do we get those things done? How do we make it right and get people to know that doing things that are right isn't all about what's convenient to the pocketbook or what have you, or in those things. And I think it is through the masses seeing these stories, so that when we can culminate together again, that we will have passion for these things together. And maybe time right now is just to pause so that we can all build up that passion again and go, no, you're going to hear me. I'm not going to be passive here. I'm going to be active in having you hear my voice.
One of the amazing things, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I was just agreeing. I thought that was.
Yeah, it was. When you're in a movie theater with, let's say, 500 people or more, there's going to be one person that starts laughing at the humor in the film. And just by law of averages, right? Yeah. And I think that a lot of people are uncomfortable laughing when it comes to things around disabilities. And so the beauty of being in a much larger room is that someone's going to clue the rest of the audience in that maybe it's okay to laugh. And for the love of God, that's the film we made. It's a very joyous film. It's full of humor, and the kind of humor that it's just not expected at all. And it's not expected because you don't see it.
Yeah. Well, and being in a dark room with a bunch of other people, you can have that response and not feel that anyone's going to know it was you. You know, I mean, like people around you going to know you laughed or whatever. If you're people feeling uncomfortable about that, and I think it's all the not knowing the right terms, not wanting to insult or what have you, in a lot of cases. But like the idea of laughing at something, hopefully it's a response. It's not, I thought that's funny, now I'm giving you a laugh. It's that I feel free to laugh, and then like you said, cue other people in that might have felt uncomfortable with allowing their reaction to happen. But the nice thing about a theater is that you're not really looking at anybody else's face except for the ones on screen, and that's a fantastic thing to have. I think in those times to understand where you're at with things. You know, you might not know that you had a bias until you're in a room full of other people and realize, oh, I have a bias towards that because I'm not responding the same way. That's important for people to feel, which I guess you don't necessarily have as often with a group of maybe family members, although some families are more free than others.
So we're coming up on a hard out, but I wanted to squeeze in just one last question for each of you, and maybe we'll start with Nicole. Nicole, if you had sort of a single piece of advice to give an up and coming documentarian to help them succeed, what would that be?
I think it would be, the lesson that we really took to heart, and I think is partially responsible for the success of this movie, which is just let the footage speak to you. Like, let the footage itself dictate the story. Be patient enough to let that happen. Don't come in and stomp all over the story or try to fit the footage into some preordained idea that you have. It's an organic means of making a film that takes time and patience, but is incredibly rewarding. And I think if you just take that attitude and take that stance towards the material that you've either found or shot or gathered, you will end up with a stronger film.
All right, Jim, how about you?
That's really good.
Top that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think there's 2 points I think that's important to make. With anything that you're doing, finding your own community of people that like to do what you're doing is really important. And one should be, hopefully, unless you're up in the space station, and maybe even there, find somebody that maybe wants to collaborate with you. So it's just that kind of thing helps you learn from other people and such, and you just don't have the whole burden. And the other thing I would say is that, the first thing you try to do, it doesn't have to be your masterpiece. You could literally do a 3-minute documentary about these 2, mourning doves that are right outside my window right now. And just by practicing that and working with the tools, you'll get easier and easier with it. I think the most frustrating thing, like for me as a sound person, is when I first got my first digital sampler, and there were all these menus and all these different things, and it was frustrating. I knew what I wanted to do, but I couldn't remember all the menus, and I had to look at the manual. And I remember that one day where all of a sudden I was going bip, 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 I'm ready to go. And if you keep on working with the tools and just keep going, it's gonna become an extension of your mind eventually.
All right, great advice. Well, Jim, Nicole, thanks so much for joining us, giving us some of your time today. We encourage everyone to go check out the movie. I know Chris was talking about it this morning, just raving about it. So everyone should go check it out. It's on Netflix right now. And is Netflix the only place you can watch it? Can you see it anywhere else, or rent it or anything?
Netflix it is.
Netflix it is, yeah.
All right. Well, everyone has Netflix, right? So everyone can go and watch it.
And can I just say this? The great thing about Netflix is there's audio descriptions for the visually impaired. There's great captioning for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And if you're deaf blind, you can go to their website and go to the menu that says details and download a 161-page script of the film so you can experience it also. So It is truly a very accessible film.
Excellent. Great deal. All right. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see everyone next time.
Thank you.
Thanks to our guests, Nicole Newnham and Jim Lebrecht. Again, you can watch Crip Camp on Netflix, or you can at least go to YouTube and check out the trailer. Also, if you're an educator and would like some historical curriculum about this topic, you can find resources at cripcamp.com. If you've been listening to the podcast and enjoy it, again, I'd like to remind you to go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. It's super, super helpful for us. So for Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker Podcast. We'll catch you next time.